Hey, 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 what's up? St. Albans and friends. Thank you. Wednesday. It doesn't quite work, but I'm trying. Thank you for humoring me. My name is Aaron. I'm one of the pastors, priests, ministers at St. Albans Episcopal Church, Waco. Some of you know that because you're members. Some of you are guests, friends, relatives. We're glad that you're here, whatever brought you here. We're going to, in just a moment, bring up our speaker. Before I do that, I want to remind you of a couple of things. One, if you have questions during the talk that you would like to be featured in the Q&A at the end, write them down on the card you have. There's cards on all the tables. You've got pens there, so just feel free to write those down. And then after the talk, we'll go around and collect them and share them with the bishop and see what he says. Then, the other thing I want to let you know is there is a hello card on your table as well. If you want to stay in the loop about stuff like this that St. Albans is doing, we have events throughout the year. Theology on Tap every January, but we do really wonderful things throughout the year where we investigate the relationship and questions around faith and God and why we are on this planet and what life is for and why is everything so hard, all those sorts of things. We try to talk about those things in lots of different ways. So if you want to be in the loop and stay in touch, you can fill that card out, or you can just scan the QR code and do it electronically. But we'd love to make ourselves available to you. We now have a great privilege of welcoming up the author of If You Give a Mouse a Jeep. Bishop Andy Doyle has written lots of thick books. This is not that. So I might read this one. We'll see. That's on me. That's not on him. Bishop Andy Doyle is an artist who also felt a call to ministry. He is a musician, he is a writer, he is a driver of a Jeep with every bell and whistle that one can have. He just had rocket launchers installed, I think, just when traffic gets really heavy. It's an orange Jeep that looks a lot like the one on the cover of this book. So if you see it around, you know that there's a good bishop in town. He is a father of two, married to Joanne, and he has done incredible work over his time as the bishop of this diocese. It's a great privilege to have him here tonight. He'll be headed out to go to Fort Worth right after this for Diocesan Council, which begins on February. So he is working really hard, and we are just grateful that he's taken some time to be with us tonight to talk about something. You know, you may ask, why did you ask the bishop to talk about AI? So one of the things about Andy Doyle is that he's a student and observer of the world. He is always interested in what the church is doing, what the world is doing, the big questions that people are asking, and how the church and the world are in conversation about those things. So AI has obviously been something that's growing. He's been thinking about it for a long time. It's something he's been talking to us about at our clergy gatherings. And so when we were planning this series on AI, we thought, well, who should we get? You know, we came up with some names, and somebody said, what about Andy Doyle? We thought, there's no way. I mean, he's so busy. He's on conference calls with God and the angels all the time. You know, how is he going to get time to be here? But, you know, you never know unless you ask, right? So we asked, and he said yes, so we're so glad you're here. Thank you. Please welcome Bishop Andy Doyle.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you all tonight. Thank you for showing up. Today, we just heard that a new sermon writing AI app is available for all of our clergy, but not for the clergy in the Diocese of Texas, because I've told them they can't do that. But it is out, and it does cost money. Big surprise to use this particular one. That was just today. I wanted to, let's see, Tuesday, my reading included Anthropic AI safety push. The artificial intelligence startup has unveiled a technique to stop users from eliciting harmful content from its models as top tech groups race to guard against the dangers posed by AI. That was Tuesday in the Financial Times. This one, AI keeps going wrong. What if it can't be fixed? When was that? This was last week. This one was Chinese. You all probably know about DeepSeek. Chinese AI leap triggers tech tumble by sowing doubt over chip spending. They've now been sued for that. So those are some things that are just right. I mean, that's just within a couple of days. We've done a book of provocation in the diocese to begin to think about the future. We worked with the Institute for the Future on that project for a number of months this last fall. And AI features prominently in how the church will react and deal with AI. So this is a present question for all of us. And I look forward to having a little bit of conversation. But first, let me just offer some of my perspective on, given where the conversation has been over the last month or so, I want to kind of come in from a little bit of a different perspective, but it will also rely on some of the, assuming that you know some things. So let me just begin with this. Today, over 1.5 million people in Japan are living in extreme social withdrawal, a phenomenon known as hikikomori. It isn't just a Japanese problem, but cases are rising globally, including the US, Italy, and South Korea. So what happens when an entire generation chooses to disappear from society? And what does this tell us about the context and modern world in which we're living? At the heart of this crisis is a shift. It's one that prioritizes digital life over embodied relationships. And that's, I think, formed a lot of your conversation over the last couple of weeks. And AI will only accelerate those. So we're not looking at something that, we've reached some static point where the system moves a little bit. It's actually generating more and more and more. So let me give you a definition. The term hikikomori, translated, means pulling inward and being confined. First identified in the 1990s, it describes individuals, mostly young adults, who withdraw from society for 6 months or longer, often living in isolation at their parents' home and in their rooms, avoiding work, school, social interaction. Parents don't see these young adults often. They typically go out at night to get their food. Japan has 1.5 million. That's 1 in 50 young people. South Korea, more than 5% of their young adults are at risk of the same. Italy has 120,000 cases. This is a rising medical, psychological issue, and the United States shows an emerging parallel, not in education, employment, or training, so we call it NEAT, an acronym, Populations Gaming Disorder. These are some ways in which we in the U.S. talk about it. Unlike past recluses, modern hikikomori remain digitally connected. So social media, gaming, virtual spaces, AI-driven platforms, TikTok, ChatGPT, YouTube, VR worlds create simulated social life. Isolation feels less lonely because of the digital engagement, yet it deprives individuals of real human contact. So we are generating ourselves as a human race, individuals who don't know how to relate with people in the world anymore. And part of that, we'll talk some about why I think that is a growing, should be, and is for me a growing concern, not just a theological one, but a cultural health crisis. If technology allows people to withdraw into digital life indefinitely, what will happen when AI becomes so advanced that it completely replaces human interaction, right? So that's already happening. It's not really just a question anymore, because we know that there are dating sites where you can date an AI person. So it's already happening. The role of technology in facilitating withdrawal is the next kind of piece I want to highlight. And part of this has to do with AI's ability to run algorithmic persuasion. So you've heard about the algebra and some of those things that are needed, but it teaches people through their experience how to leap through self-reinforcing digital loops. So what that means is that people are having experiences that naturally draw them deeper and deeper into the relationship with AI-generated companions like replica, AI girlfriends, deepfake influencers that simulate relationships but aren't real presence. Virtual reality and AI-enhanced gaming replace real-world exploration with controlled, dopamine-driven feedback loops. So one of the pieces is the way our mind works as it engages digital life, constant connectivity, and we move further and further away from our human interactions. And we're seeing, and I will tell you that the science on this is really varied, and there are a lot of people who have problems with the evidence that's being shown. But the real issue is that we're not paying attention to the overall number. So you do have issues with the research that's being done, but the problem is it pops over here, and it pops up over here, and it pops over here. And if you start looking at the aggregate, you have a major social issue. So let me talk a little bit about Ian McGilchrist. He is a philosopher. He is a specialist in the brain and how the brain works. And so he right now I'm reading The Matter of Things, but his last popular book was Master and Emissary. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening. The left hemisphere sees the world as a set of controllable, predictable systems. The right hemisphere understands the world relationally, contextually, and through lived experience. Ian McGilchrist suggests that modern life prioritizes left hemisphere thinking, reducing social life to online exchanges, gaming interactions, and AI-driven companionship. When the left hemisphere dominates, we mistake symbols for reality, data for meaning, and AI-generated interactions for real relationships. Hikikomori, for instance, is not just a social crisis, but a preview of what happens when people abandon embodied relationships for digital ones and allow the left hemisphere to rule. The transition to this power I'll just offer a couple of questions. If people already prefer digital relationships over real ones, what happens when AI becomes even more convincing? We already see people forming deep emotional connections with chatbots and AI-generated personas. How long before they start insisting that AI is truly conscious? Let's explore then why AI will be so persuasive and why many of us will believe it is real, even when we're told it isn't. So my guess is that you've all come tonight, anybody who's been here for the last couple of weeks anyway, probably already has an idea of what you think about this, right? That's been nurtured, and it could be positive, could be negative. It doesn't really matter because the majority of human beings, I believe, actually will believe that AI is conscious. And I'm going to tell you why. It is a master of imitation. It is rapidly advancing and imitating human-like behavior. It's no longer just a tool, but it now mimics human speech, reasoning, emotional responses, and creativity. The LLMs, or large language models like ChatGPT, can hold complex conversations, generate stories, and even simulate different personalities. AI-generated deepfake technology can create realistic human avatars that look, sound, and act like actual people. So in my work with Institute for the Future, one of the things that's been amazing is to get some insight into this new technology that's coming out, where I can actually hold a conversation with one of my mentors, Bob Johansson, but it's AI. It's complete AI. So they've recorded his, and he actually thinks this is the future for him, to continue his coaching career long after he's dead. You will actually be able to participate in having a conversation with Bob Johansen as if he were talking to you on a video screen. The replica AI and AI companions, millions of users develop emotional relationships with chatbots, personalized emotional responses. Some claim that AI companions understand them better than real people. Deepfake AI influencers are gaining millions of followers. So this is a growing edge within the AI commerce world. AI-generated religious leaders. In Japan, Buddhist temples use AI-generated priests to perform digital blessings and counseling sessions. Some churches are experimenting with AI-generated sermons, prompting the question, can an AI be a pastor? So, Aaron, you don't read any more of my books. There it is, an AI pastor right there. And what I would say is that this becomes really interesting when you think about how important it is for us to have our services online for people who are at home, people to look, search. It's a form of evangelism. But when you look at the ability to have someone on there who can respond to people in their prayer life, you can easily fall prey to, well, let's have AI do it, and it would do a great job. But is that the same thing? Humans will insist AI is conscious, and this would go back to McGilchrist for a second. The left hemisphere, because of how it prioritizes things, will see these kind of clear, structured answers and be persuaded that there is a coherent, conscious thing. AI fits perfectly into the left hemisphere framework. It processes information quickly, responds coherently, and it follows logical structures that align with human speech patterns. But it actually is all set up in the algorithm, as you've heard, to answer those questions. So anything outside of that, it doesn't do well with. It's really bad at it. So you can take a document, for instance, and you can ask it to find something, and it will struggle because what you've asked it to find isn't part of the language pairs in the algorithm. So it won't think it's there, even though you may have entered the most important things out of that document. So it actually will not be able to do, it doesn't read in the same way. It's looking at word relationships. And I don't think you've talked about this, but the way, if you can imagine, for those of you who are creative people and kind of have like picture people, imagine with me for just a second that you have a big giant graph here above my head and you have all these dots, okay? And so the algorithm is using these data pair vocabulary pieces. And then the way that it works is it charts a path through that data pattern. So if you ask something down here, it's not going to be able to find it. You ask something that's not in that data pattern or programmed into it, it has a hard time. But as it increases its capacity, as it increases its information, more and more of those data patterns are going to come closer and closer together and give you better answers. That's how the algorithm actually works. The left hemisphere, though, has a blind spot, preferring representation over reality, which I said a little bit earlier. It struggles to differentiate between convincing imitation and real presence. AI simulates intelligence, but it does not have interiority, it does not have self-awareness, and it does not have lived experience. So I really did tell the clergy in the diocese that research was okay, but you can't have AI write your sermons. And I asked AI to tell me, why shouldn't they be able to use AI for their sermon? And then I read it in a HAL voice from 2001: A Space Odyssey so that they could hear it clearly. And one of the things that AI told me was it has no life experience. And that the key to connecting in good sermons, it said, was real life experience, shared between those listening and those speaking in all relationships, but especially in a sermon. Because the left hemisphere, though, values coherence over depth, many will believe and just jump to consciousness, right? You will make this jump, and you will be convinced it's real. Historical precedents for technology and anthropomorphism have always been issues. and have been ways in which humans project onto other items. Children treat toys and dolls as if they're alive. People name and talk to their cars, robots, and smart assistants. In 1966, MIT's Eliza, which was kind of one of the first, convinced users it understood them. Right? So this has been going on. It's not like something that just happened. Any of you make a radio station with your iTunes or other account? Yeah, AI, right? Now, it's advanced to a new way of doing the program, and that's why it's increasing so much faster than it has been. But we've all been using AI in some part of our life if you're online. Why the AI illusion is different today, unlike past simulations, today's AI learns from human interactions, meaning it mirrors and adapts. The more time people spend interacting with AI, the more real it will seem. As my daughter, who is 23, said, "Would you please stop feeding AI all that information?" The illusion of presence leads people to insist that AI is not just intelligent, but sentient. But if AI can imitate not just speech, but emotions, relationship, how will we convince people it's not truly alive? Well, that's where the right hemisphere comes in. The right hemisphere recognizes AI's limits. The right hemisphere is responsible for context, lived experience, and deep relationality. Unlike the left hemisphere, it does not separate intelligence from embodiment. It actually believes the two are connected and understands that the two are connected, just like the two hemispheres. They don't work the same way. They actually need each other to work. It understands that true consciousness is not just processing information, but it exists as a whole physical thing that we have no clue how it works. We have no understanding of why this, and some of you may debate this after our talk tonight, but how this, right, has consciousness. And it's everything. And I can sense whether you're paying attention. I can smell you, even though, what's his name? Tom Papa says, he thought he smelled like ham forever. We actually can smell each other. We're sensing all kinds of things in this room all at once from each other. When you get up and preach or talk, if you're a teacher or anything, you can tell whether people are paying attention. There's a whole body thing going on. And most of it we don't know. One of the things that we're learning from autism is that some of the key pieces that help us manage all the information that we actually are taking in is structured differently in autistic children so that they don't have the same kind of buffer. So they're being bombarded by the same stuff we are. It's not that they're operating differently, but rather that they don't have the buffer that most of us have to be able to sort out all of the information that's flying at us. So I want to move a little bit more, though, to this question of embodiment. AI does not have a physical body, meaning it cannot experience the world through touch, movement, or any of the sensations. There's an article a number of years ago on human superpowers, which is actually our acuity around space. We just walk into a thing and we navigate space. But our bodies actually help us to navigate space. That's a sensation. It's not like you're actually navigating the space before you think you're navigating the space. So that's how fast our sensations are giving us data and information. AI does not have any mortality, has no suffering. Human consciousness is based on the awareness, we believe, of death, vulnerability, and suffering. It's something that we all experience. And love and sacrifice. True relationships require self-giving, sacrifice, and the ability to make moral choices. AI is incapable of that kind of genuine love back. So we can place stuff on it because we will use our left hemisphere to think that's exactly what we should do. But it does not operate in the same way. It has no commitment to us. It does not matter if any one of us is here today or tomorrow or the next day. because it doesn't have this experience of the world and consciousness. Theological perspective, the danger of disembodied in a disembodied world, a shift there. Christian theology emphasizes incarnation, presence, embodiment. Jesus did not appear as an algorithm, but as a physical person in the form of humanity. This is a central Christian theology. In fact, most religions have some form of understanding the importance of the human body itself. We have different approaches about what to do about that body, but this sense of, and even if you're not a believer, but you're here tonight listening, if you're a humanist, you have the same thing. There's something about our embodiment that is important to our culture. If we grant AI human-like status, we risk losing our theological and ethical commitment to embodied human dignity. Now, we're in a big debate about vocabulary about that, but what is clear to me as a theologian and bishop and pastor is that embodiment is essential. And that Jesus, and I want to talk a little bit about this in a minute, Jesus and his life on earth as a Christian, we view that as central to embodiment and dignity. So I'm going to come to that in just a minute. Transition, the consciousness, McGilchrist's consciousness and the nature of reality. Just think of this. If AI can persuade us that it is intelligent, will we also believe that it is conscious? I say so. The answer to this, though, we must return to a bigger question about what is reality. So we turn to McGilchrist's theory of consciousness again. AI mimics the left hemisphere, prioritizes, as I've said, the right hemisphere, true intelligence, right, requires embodiment. AI will never have that embodiment, and there's a theological danger. So I've covered all that so far, and I want to take this step then to explain why the modern world is predisposed to believing in AI personhood. McGilchrist's theory of the brain hemisphere explains our vulnerability to artificial intelligence and what this reveals about our relationship to actual reality. Why is the brain divided? The two hemispheres process the world fundamentally in different ways. Do you all know about what the amygdala does? The amygdala, right? It coordinates that. Did you know that most of what the amygdala does is keep the two from communicating? Right? Like it actually, we don't know how, but that actually what we do know is that science is learning that most of what it does is editing. And so it allows different parts of the brain to be working at different times and shuts down communication from the other side. And so part of this offers us a question about how much time are we actually spending going deep, having human relationships, right? So the more we shut that off, if we follow McGilchrist's theory, the more we'll be in the left brain, the more we will take generalizations and big pictures as reality, versus recognizing that every one of us have arrived here tonight with a different story. A story of love, a story of family that we've come from, a story of hardship, a story of pain and suffering. Like we've all arrived here with these different things. But it would be easy if we just looked at it left brain. Yeah, well, they're all interested in AI, those people in that room, right? They're all the same. And this is part of the real struggle that we're having right now in the culture is, yes, we are a whole thing, right? But we're also individuals as part of the whole thing. We have to spend more time, I think, in a world that is relational and interconnected, understanding that all of our actions and inactions actually are part of a great system. That reality as it is not able to be reduced to symbols. It just doesn't work that easy. Understand that context, depth, and embodied presence values the human relation, lived experience, and mystery. The problem that I've described here leads us to the next piece, which is this illusion. It's actually easier to live in the illusion than it is in the difficulty of individual and community relationships. It is easier to think of whole bodies of people as the same than it is to recognize the complexity of the individuals in any group of people. And so if we think about where we are in the country, I think it's easy for us to recognize we are operating at a very high level of representation and symbol for the other, whoever the other is. The issue for me as a Christian is that that's not what Christianity is about, actually. Because Christ came into the world as an individual, as a human being, for me in the revelation that I understand. And that then resists, like the right hemisphere, it resists the idea that everybody's the same. So that's the first piece. And theological implication here is that in one way, and I think this is important for us as Episcopalians, is that in one way, we would say by our very nature, by our very creation, by our very being, we have some form of dignity. And that Christ, as a Christian, Christ coming to be a part of that embodied humanity then gives even greater dignity to our created nature. Just follow me so far? That kind of makes some sense, right? And so there is not a dignity that is based upon anything we've done. It's actually a dignity created by the incarnation of God in Christ for the Christian. This is how we begin to think of each other. It's why it's really difficult for Christians who are using their right brain to go down that a group of people are all criminals, right? Or a group of people with mental, non-neurotypical people, right? Neurodivergent people, all have problems. We can't do it that way. It doesn't work for us as Christians because each person has a dignity in their very nature of being wherever and however they live their life today. Now, the second thing that I want to shift to is the person of Jesus on the cross. Because for the Christian, this is really the key. The Christian understands that Jesus' suffering on the cross was for everybody, not just Christians. Right? So, in our tradition, it's not just that Jesus came to save a few people. If we read the scripture, Jesus came to save the world. Right? I mean, some of you can even quote scripture on this point. Right? Do you all know that? Right? Do I need to say it? I mean, come on. Like you're in, right? You're like, dang it, he got me with that scripture thing. Hate that when that happens, that bishop. So what we do is that we move then, not just to the Genesis 1 piece, the Imago Dei, or right, this created, and I know you talked some about this regarding Augustine in a previous take, but also the Philippians 2:6, right? So you've got that passage about Jesus coming lower than God and the angels to be amongst us, right? So again, offering that dignity. But we have to go to the cross, not just an act of love, but the ultimate affirmation of embodied dignity. That God did not redeem us as a disembodied algorithm, but took human flesh, and the cross affirms that suffering, love, and sacrifice are integral to true personhood. So what becomes important is that no matter what your journey has been, no matter where you are, our understanding of who Jesus is and our Christian faith is to see every human being as dignity, not granted by what they've done or left undone, but by the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. This is why we visit prisoners. Right? This is why we would say, yes, you have to follow the laws of your country, but there's always a time where God's love for you may be made known to you. There is never anything, you've got the whole, the two crosses, there's 3 crosses. 2 of them not so nice guys, right? They're thieves, right? Right? And on this day, I will see you in the kingdom of heaven. Why? Not because of what they did, not because of some sense that they in the last moment came. No, because of who God is and who the person of Jesus is in our Christology. So this brings me to the last couple of points that I want to make, and then we'll open up for questions. And that is, there's a new document out, I think it came out last week, maybe it's the week before. It's called Antiqua et Nova. And what it means is the old made new is the Rome's response to individual and AI, individual life, human life, and AI. I want to make clear some of the differences between how Roman Catholics see this, how we see it as Anglicans, and then I want to press on that a little bit from my own perspective. Certainly, Antiqua et Nova is not a full encapsulation of Roman Catholic doctrine on anthropology, Christian anthropology. It is Aquinan in it's from Aquinas, though, so it does differ from Augustine's understanding of human life and anthropology, and so it does have a very important difference there. But it adds to the real question because it comes at the question around AI from the perspective of intelligence. And where does intelligence come from? So it's a good document. If you're like really weird like me, you're going to go read that thing. If you want to know what I think fully about it, you can go to my Substack. But anyway, there's lots of other stuff, so if you're just nosy, just go down the rabbit hole with the document. It's a really good one. They are way out in front of everybody else on the AI question. They dominate both the UN, European courts on questions about AI. So they are very far ahead of us. This year, last August, we had the first Episcopal ecumenical gathering of people to discuss AI, but they've been doing it for years. So just a sense that they're asking some good questions. But if we were to look at the document called the Buffalo Statement, which is a great summary, you can get it off the Anglican website, a great summary of Christian anthropology from an Anglican and Orthodox perspective, because it's an Orthodox Anglican agreement. That's why it's called the Buffalo Statement. And it's actually really good because it says that you can't understand human beings without understanding community. No big surprise there, as Anglicans probably, or Episcopalians, no big surprise around the Orthodox. They believe that it's only in community that we are able to understand our true human nature. And I would argue that both are true. Both the Roman Catholic perspective on individuality and intelligence, and then also this kind of sacramental, what I would call sacramental Anglican view. What I want to press on is that it doesn't matter whether the church is there or not, but there's actually dignity for every human being, period. And I think that this is the strength that the conversation with our humanist brothers and sisters and siblings really brings to the conversation, which is that we have this human life together. Some of us are Christians, some of us are Muslims, some of us are humanists, some of us are Jews. Yes, but we all share something really important together, which is the life that we live. And I think for the church to be at mission in the world, for the church to engage this evangelism, we actually have to begin there. We have to understand individual life as it comes to be a part of the whole, and the great diversity then becomes an important part of recognizing who Christ is as a full body, right? It's only there. I mean, Jesus could just look a lot like me, but I'm pretty sure that's not right. Right? And so it takes other people, and the more different, the better. That's one of the reasons why I've loved being a part of the Anglican Communion and being able to represent the Episcopal Church and the Diocese of Texas and the Archbishop and trips all around the world. It's given me an opportunity to meet other Christian people completely different than me. Different lifestyles, different understandings, different conversations about sexuality and gender. I mean, all of the. And they're all Christians, right? And so that capacity to see this great body of Christ that Christ died for and gave dignity to has expanded my own understanding of who I am as an embodied Christian and how the world is meant to begin to reflect in church community the kingdom of God. And the church has an opportunity, perhaps unlike many, many hundreds of years, to operate differently than the world around us, which means we can actually be a place where people who are incredibly different on just about every perspective, even Republicans and Democrats, could actually come together. Why? Because we're not run by politics. We see the world through God and Christ, as I've just explained, and our life together is actually not to mimic the world, but to work together in reflecting God's kingdom. My wife has said oftentimes she's pretty sure that the gate to heaven will include her standing right next to Newt Gingrich. And so she better get used to it right now. You know? It's like really good. I'm like, that's great. That's great insight, right? Because otherwise we have to say Jesus didn't die for him, whoever the him is or the other person is that we disagree with. But every Christian comes into argument, discussion. That's why we call it apologetics. We come into relationship with each other, recognizing as Christians that the person across from us, Jesus has already died for. That's where this person's dignity comes from, their very creation, their very nature, and that we actually have no power over that. I mean, God, as far as I can tell, and I'm now finished because I'm getting on my high horse here, right? But look, I don't think God's listening to me about who gets into heaven or not. I think God made God's decisions a long time ago. And that the whole of humanity and the whole of creation is moving, it's groaning. That great passage from Paul. It's groaning towards the kingdom. It's groaning towards the kingdom. And what an amazing thing to get to be a part of that. Okay, I'm done. Questions? How do we do that?
So this is a Q&A time. You want to pull up a chair?
Yeah.
Be more comfortable.
I was moving that for you.
No, I'll take this one. All right. So as we're getting situated up here, Andrew is collecting cards, and Garrett, and they will bring them forward. We'll see if we can stump the bishop.
I'm ready.
All right.
Wait, those aren't the ones I gave you.
Where are the pre-printed questions? Okay. As we're collecting cards, I'll begin with a question. So I think there is a temptation in all human organizations and in churches to try to block the bad and harness the good, to quote Kevin Nealon in Billy Madison. Block the bad, harness the good. Thank you, that one person.
I was with you.
Yeah, thank you. You're just saying that because you're my bishop. So AI has a lot of negative implications, and it's also an uncertain, scary thing. And so I think we've heard over the past few weeks, and we've seen maybe in our own lives some of the potential negative aspects. And so there is a tradition in Christianity to say you got to keep the bad out, and so just don't do it. We're really good at the thou shalt not. Don't do it. Which St. Paul says, the law increases the trespass. The more you say to not walk on the grass, then the path develops right across the middle of the grass. Preachers know that people tend to not do what we tell them to do. So if this...
It hasn't stopped us.
I know.
So
we're
far.
still trying. This time it'll work.
It's going to get them.
So other than saying don't,
right?
What are some things that the church might say, or Christians might say, or people might say to folks who ask the question, am I allowed? What does God think about me using AI? Am I a bad person if I use it? Am I partnering with this evil technology? What's a way that you might respond to that question?
Have you stopped ordering Amazon?
Just make them feel bad about themselves. Yeah.
I think, yeah.
You hypocrites!
Hello.
Yeah. Oh, so
Who
you're
told
off
you
Spotify?
to? Yeah. Who told you to turn from the judgment that's coming?
That's from the Bible, right?
I think that's a
Okay,
passage. I don't
yeah.
know. Not so much. So part of I hope you see in the approach, actually, we have to accept what we're going to do. We're already using it. We've already mostly adopted it. An article came out this week about the death of the internet. We are almost at the tipping point where most of the information on the internet is AI created. So even if you don't think you're using AI, but you're using Google, you're actually very likely to be using it. So I think part of it is for us as pastors to recognize we're going to do this. You're doing it now. But are there places where efficiencies can be used? Yes, of course. I mean, did you fill out your parochial report? I think you did, because you're not on my list.
Yeah, I'm not on the naughty list.
Right, so there's a form that he has to do. But what if we could use AI to help us fill those forms out a lot easier, and as the year goes by, so you could actually, like a business, know kind of what was happening, and if there was something that you needed to pay attention to, you could. So I think it's going to offer us places. The question is it human or not? So this is what I'm really clear about. The ultimate question that's important for the church is to discern its consciousness and to understand it's an opportunity to understand Christian anthropology, right? What does it mean to be human today? And these are questions Aquinas and Augustine couldn't have answered, right? So, because we're in a different context. But I say all of that to say you're going to use it. But we're invited with our right hemisphere to begin to ask, what's the consequence? So, unlike some of the AI-produced information online, when you use an AI question, it doesn't use a car's worth of gasoline every time you do it. It's actually 10 times what a Google search is, which is still less than all of the electronic appliances in your house that you have plugged in and are using on a regular basis, right? I mean, so I think there's a piece of this which is understanding the complexity of it all and helping people make good decisions, right? We actually have to deal with the question of how much power we use. Going after AI is a way of avoiding the greater question. Oh, AI is terrible. We should not use. No, stop that. I'm already using it. So the question really is, what is my responsibility in helping decrease the footprint of power usage for the church? Church loves making statements, right? Do you have solar panels? I'm just checking.
No.
Okay. But you see what I'm saying? We're more apt to go after these big things, left hemisphere, than do the hard work of asking ourselves, how do I change my life and begin to do this work that will allow future generations to have the power they need to live? Right, I think that's a much more interesting question, but those are questions that take a long time, so I just don't think it's an easy answer.
Yeah, so I want easy answers for everything.
Of course you do, left hemisphere, Aaron.
So AI,
I like to call you Aaron Left Hemisphere.
Left hemisphere, Aaron.
Don't even try.
Yeah. So the
these are a lot of questions,
people.
Aaron. If I had AI right now, we could just do these.
I know. I want to see you on a screen. I don't want you in the room. It's less threatening that way. So we want easy answers.
Yes.
The Romans wouldn't do anything without looking at the chicken guts.
Nice.
We go to tarot readings.
No.
We look at, that's another thing the bishop told us we're not allowed to do. There's a Christian tarot movement.
Yeah.
So just so you know, no glitter in the baptismal font or the Ash
rules.
Wednesday ashes.
Things I never thought I'd have to say.
Yep. No AI in the sermons and no goldfish handed out to children at the communion rail. So it's been tried and squashed. So Not at St. Albans Waco. We haven't tried
Bears.
it. Yeah.
Like Graham, Teddy
Teddy
Grahams.
bears are okay.
They're all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's just
the
those
goldfish.
fish.
Okay, we're off track. So we want easy answers.
Yes.
This is what reading the stars or reading the Magic 8-Ball or the Ouija board or all these are different human attempts to try to get easy, quick answers to certain questions. Should I take the job? Should I ask her to marry me? Should I go to the golf game or go to the whatever? So all these things, and big questions too. We want easy, quick answers that guarantee the best outcome, and it seems to me that AI is a thing that people are turning to for that.
It's just one of the
One of the interesting things about Jesus is that often when people answer questions, he doesn't give them direct answers, and
Like
even
me.
when, like you, you've been spending a lot of time with him. I can tell it's rubbed off. So at his trial, he barely says a word. He doesn't answer the questions. He often answers questions with other questions. So there seems to be something about the way God works in the world where God does not give answers, but sort of wants maybe you to wait in the silence or to sit in the uncertainty or something. Reflect on that theologically and how that relates to AI. What can the church say in that space?
Well, I think a piece of this is our complete dependence upon technology and its growing kind of enslavement. So, and I want to use that term, that's an important term. Maybe a commodification might be better. All technology makes money off of how you're doing today. It sells your information. It actually, Facebook Meta has been shown to use its algorithms to target you for certain advertisements when you feel sad. And you share that online. The whole thing, which appeared to be free, is actually using your body and its feelings to make money. And when we really get down to it, it's about 4 people are making money. So a piece of this is disconnecting. We've got to disconnect. And that's becoming really hard. I mean, my parents didn't know where I was half the time. We will be okay, right? Well, maybe, right? I mean, you don't judge that. But you know what I'm saying is that we've become used to being able to know. You say, well, the world's more complicated now. Yeah. Okay, well, if they need to get a hold of you, they can get a hold of you. That's not the question. The question is, do you actually need to be on eBay? Do you need to be on Etsy? Do you need to be on Amazon? Do you need to be on Facebook? Do you need to be constantly? Does work need to be able to contact you at every moment of your life? Do you need to answer that email? Right? You know, it used to be when you were waiting for the school bus, you waited. I'm completely riffing on Tom Papa here. Look, his new special, it's one of my favorite things, but it's true, right? You waited, and then you made up games, and you had conversations. You got beat up. There were all kinds of things that I experienced waiting for the bus. But I didn't need to be, like my parents didn't need to be in touch with me all the time. So, and did bad things happen? Yeah. But I think that's another piece of it, which is that
bad things are happening. Other bad things are happening
now.
now.
Lots of bad things happening. But we've got this idea that we're supposed to live way up here, and the truth is that that's not real. We can't even maintain that kind of high-stress living. And if you're playing that game with your head and your body, that's where the dopamine starts coming in, right? It actually is feeding. These things are feeding you physically. It's not a brain thing. And so actually you have to set the devices down. Every day. Now, I don't care. I do care if you pray during that time. But you spend it with other people. And some of the newer generations are getting this. I went to a thing the other day. They've got these things, these D&D centers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like these board game places.
Yes.
Amazing. People come there to play board games with people they don't know.
Yeah.
what? Right? I mean, you see what I'm saying, though? It's like you've got to, that's actually, people are recognizing they're hungry for that. I think COVID showed us that we really need people and that we weren't fed by being connected via Zoom. So that's my perspective, is actually that we have a whole Christian tradition of being quiet, waiting, listening,
Being uncomfortable.
Well,
Sometimes.
It's uncomfortable because we don't do it.
Yeah, we haven't got used to it.
If you worked in the field, people work in the field as farmers, right? And when you didn't have all the technology with you, you actually were by yourself working in the field.
One of the things that I've read about how to sleep better, one of the things they say is to, when you wake up in the morning, go outside and expose yourself to natural light for 20 to 30 minutes.
That's exactly.
And the fact that we have to now be told that.
Right.
Like it used to just be that living took care of that for you.
This is true.
And there's a lot of things now you have to do intentionally. You have to kind of resist, go against the flow. Here's an interesting question. It's easy to presume, and as you talked about the evidence of what's going on in Japan and South Korea and this country, that adolescents and young adults are vulnerable to the pitfalls of AI. In what ways might older adults be vulnerable? People who are already socially withdrawn, not because they've chosen to, but maybe because of the situation they've been put in.
What we know about the future for the next many decades, well up to 2050, that social isolation is going to be one of the number one health risks in the country. And that happens for older adults faster because as you get older, you move into communities and your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you're alone, quite literally. Maybe your kids come to visit, maybe you have nursing care, but for the most part, you're in a different world than you are right now. So this is a very real place for the church to begin to realize that because people go into assisted living doesn't mean that they are gone. It's one of my biggest arguments for the clergy are notorious for cleaning the membership list. Why don't you find out where your members are? Because a good third of them are going to be in homes with assisted living and nursing homes with better care. And they haven't gone somewhere. They just can't come to church anymore. They're physically not able to come to church. So minister to those people. Who said that they weren't your people anymore? Well, they're not on my list. I just think it's a big issue. It's huge. Now, one of the problems that makes young adults more susceptible is their brain hasn't finished developing. So in terms of technology and self-isolation in regards to that has a lot more to do with what's up here and how it's grown.
We have time for one more question.
I know.
There's a lot.
There's so many.
And if you are you okay to stick around for like another 2 hours just to talk to? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Embodied.
Yeah, you
ministry.
Can go home. We'll have
Embodied
a lot
ministry.
of fun. We want to talk.
With the church will face this question, and this has kind of come up in a lot of these questions. Like in Eastern Europe, they used a Jesus avatar in a confessional booth. It was well received.
It was. I think they got rid of that.
Yeah.
The Pope could put that, stopped it.
Yeah. So there's questions about kind of what the church can do here. And there's going to be parts of the church that embrace it and already have, obviously. Churches that will go farther. Church has always been an early adopter of technology, from radio to the internet to books, going way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Reformation thing.
The Reformation, printing books, all that. So we're early adopters, and yet there's a movement to say no. The church, its popularity goes up and down. Do you see the church as a force that will become more attractive? And if so, what can it do with the waves of the future that are already breaking into the present? What can the church do, or what can it be thinking about? How can it be an antidote, a refuge, a safe place, a place of healing and gathering in a way that there's plenty of institutions that can do similar things, but what can the church offer in this space?
Well, I think the church, I can really only speak for the Episcopal Church because that's enough. I don't need to speak for the whole church of Christ's body, which is very complicated. I think you're right about different people within our own denomination, but certainly all over will adopt at different levels and different ways. I actually think that the life of prayer and Eucharist, discipleship, these things are going to be places where people can come and learn different ways of being together. And the trick is that the church has adopted a lot of things, but as the scripture tells us, they come and go. We thought books would be here forever. Right? I'm not sure about that, but they may be present in new forms, but carrying around a book may not be the way that looks in the future. Money. I mean, people in 2012, I said, look, you have to start thinking about how you're going to take money. How do you get your offerings? How do you meet people online? They're starting to do everything electronically. People laughed at me, right? And now there are kiosks where you can give, or most of us, the dean even called one time to ask me where my pledge was at the cathedral, but it was just because it was on automatic payment. I didn't think about it, right? So the church there will be times and seasons when we do all kinds of things. The plate hasn't always been part of our ritual on Sunday morning at all. So how these seasons, these will all change. But the incarnation and our theology doesn't. Right? I mean, people will try different things, but at the core of it is this really amazing understanding of what human beings are and how they're a unique part of creation, and how God is in relationship, and how God gives dignity to human beings and freedom to love and not love, all those kind of things. There was once an article written about the Orthodox Church. Recently, there's kind of like been this whole men go back to the Orthodox Church thing.
With beards.
With beards. All the men go back. Rowan Williams once said that no matter how long his beard gets, he's never going to become Eastern Orthodox. But anyway, that's it. But the Orthodox have gone through these ripples of like people rediscovering them. And the truth is the Orthodox really haven't changed anything. They're not like, how do we relate to the culture? They're kind of doing the same thing they would have been doing before, like for 1,000 years. Right? Like they really, so this idea that somehow we have to position ourselves with culture, I think is actually a big mistake, because I think it's hustling. And hustling is not good for anybody, and especially not good for the church. I think we have to stop hustling and say, this is who we are. And, if you believe in a different way, there are plenty of churches for you. Right? But we have this certain way of thinking theologically about human beings. That's us. And it's rooted in our liturgy. That's us. And we have ancient traditions that change very slowly. Now that requires other people to be in relationship and pull us forward. All those German hymns were because of German immigration. Right? It's not like we were singing German hymns without the Germans. Right? As Anglicans, no, all that hymnody came into the hymnal because of the German immigrations. So just to say, there are things that pull us forward, but the tradition of hymnody will continue, of singing together in person. To be able to say the Lord's Prayer, not as loud as you can, but so that I can hear.
Alan, just kidding.
Alan. But so I can hear the person next to me pray with me, regardless of what language they're speaking. To pray together is an artful act. To sit, we joke in our church about sitting in the same place like you have your assigned pew, right? Actually, did you know that's really important for prayer life? To have a sacred space that you can return to over and over again, whether it's in your house or in a church, that's yours. Because if you have that space, you're actually able to calm down faster. If you don't have to wonder about where I'm going to sit in this church, but you sit in the same place every time, as much as possible, except when those intruders come. It's a thing. But we kind of diss ourselves on it. But that's part of our deep spirituality, is the routine. that is different than something that's feeding us dopamine all the time. And it is, I think it's really sad to tell you one last story, because I know we're done.
Right, okay. You're the bishop. You can do whatever you want.
Of course. That's not true, but it's nice. Nice thinking. Thank you for that. I just finished writing about this. This is on my mind. When I was about 4 years old, I was like every other child, and I was very busy in the pew. Now, my dad was an Episcopal priest at that church where I attended with my mother, and only later did I understand what an amazing woman my mother was in putting up with all of my stuff, getting me to the pew, let alone living through a church service with me. But on this particular day, my mom was kind of tired of my Andy Doyle behavior and said, "You're old enough now to pray, so you need to kneel down and pray to God." "Well, what do I say?" I responded. "Well, you need to talk to God," she says. "Well, I don't know what to say to God." She said, "Go talk to your father." So my dad is getting ready to start the service. He's like in line in the procession, and I like, "Oh, excuse me, like I'm making all this big scene, gonna walk down the aisle. This is not embarrassing for anybody in my family. I get to the back, I'm like, "Oh, Dad," and like in one breath, I'm like, "Mom says I have to pray to God, and what do you even say to God? I don't even know what to do. This is terrible. I am oppressed as your favorite son." This is obviously all on her. And my dad, in his wisdom, said, "You need to say good morning." He said, "Just go back to your pew and say good morning to God, and everything else will happen." I think we get so wrapped up in saying the right words and kind of, in that Wayne and Garth, Saturday Night Live, "We're not worthy." Monty Python, depending on what age you are, you can trying to relate to all ages, this sense that we're not worthy before God, which is actually true, and I'm not going to go talk about that, but God and our prayer life is really not that complicated. And just being able to say good morning sometimes is all I got, right? It's like, what is it? Wow, help, thank you, right? So, those kind of easy prayers, I think sometimes that's what we got. We think we ought to show up. No, you just show up yourself with whatever it is.
Somebody asked at our newcomers class last Sunday, what's the role of a bishop? And I think we've seen tonight, we're calling us back to apostolic teaching about the incarnation and Christology and sacraments and all that, being a pastor to the church. And I want to thank you in all of your administrative and other big deal things that you do for making time to be with us tonight as our bishop, as our pastor. And if anybody would like to be confirmed or ordained, you can do that right now afterwards. That right now. So just come forward.
Don't tell Kay.
Yeah, I won't tell. No, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.